Hi. That is indeed me, Arch, or if you're from the old guard, Arch Warhammer, being mentioned in the same breath as Jeffery Epstein. And I wish I could say that I could explain this. that I could tell you how this happened, but honest to God, I have no earthly notion whatsoever how this has come about. Although, I will at least laud the website in question for pointing out that there is no evidence that Carl Benjamin or Arch had links to Epstein. Well, thank you. However, this is then immediately followed with, but in the context, that is not important. I beg to differ. Really do. I must object, Your Honor. I think whether or not somebody has been in contact with Jeffrey Epstein is pretty relevant, almost regardless of context. Universally, in fact, as I can also say with near absolute certainty that the website who made this, a Norwegian gaming website, I have no evidence whatsoever to suggest that they received millions of dollars from Jeffrey Epstein, hand-delivered to them via his private jet once a year, and the millions of dollars were always paid exclusively in Uzbekistani dinaris. Because if I had any evidence of that, I would be absolutely insane. But since we are just saying random nonsense, I figured I'd throw it out there. What? So, by the way, I do appreciate being referred to as the foremost gamergator in Norway as well. That's very nice. And being directly compared to Sargon of Akkad. You know, being the Norwegian Sargon has always been a goal of mine, of course, but one must still question why. And if we zoom out a little bit, we will get an idea as we've got here. Despite not having held any political office that we know of, my ruse remains undetected. Arch apparently continues to spread far-right propaganda on his channel. Apparently? You don't know? God help me. He has been heavily criticized for racist messages attributed to him on his Discord server, which was covered in Vice some 6 years ago. After extensive criticism of Arch, Weiss reported, amongst other things, threatening statements against the Sami and Gypsies, and that he compared Black Americans to a race from the Warhammer universe, specifically African Americans, mind you. I think, is this the Gnoblar joke? God, that's going to be coming up on 15 years old now. That's a remarkable deep dive for somebody who doesn't seem to be sure whether or not I'm spreading far-right propaganda on YouTube. And I will defend the Gnoblar joke till my dying breath, okay? That was perfect. It had everything. It had a bit of shock value, it had timing, it had subversion of expectations as I was building up towards the classic edgy joke that everybody else told, and then pivoted right at the 11th hour and delivered the coup de resistance. It was a amazing joke, and I will stand by that for all eternity, but okay. Right, so is this an article about me? No, thank God it isn't. This is about Gamergate. The eternal Gamergate, in fact. as the title reads. Oh, sweet baby Jesus. Yes, it is indeed I just do want to check the calendar real quick. Yep, no, we are in 2026, and Gamergate is still living rent-free in the minds of progressives everywhere, and boy, it is taking up a lot of space, as this is This is a long article. It is one of the finest examples of batshit insane gish-galloping I think I've ever seen. And it all launches from this idea, it's still going by the way, there we go, we find it to the commentary field, that we can discredit Gamergate in its entirety because Steve Bannon was in contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently. And Steve Bannon was somehow the man who created Gamergate, or took advantage of it, or something along those lines. I am not going to put you through the misery of reading this entire thing because, oh boy, well, on the one hand, it is an excellent example of how the average left-winger thinks in 2026, which is rather mad, and I do want to say this as well. One of the fascinating things about how the left views Gamergate is that it recognizes that this was the moment where they began to lose. See, Gamergate in and of itself was of course not a success. It was a movement made up by a huge number of wildly disparate people with very different points of views. Steve Bannon was one of them. I may mention Milo Yiannopoulos in here. That was another rather different point of view. I believe also we've got, oh, there we go, Jean-Francois Gary P. down there as well, who did actually take money from Epstein, by the way. Which, again, makes me glad that my only interaction with the man at any point was arguing against him and Richard Spencer at the same time, mind you. Oh. But right, okay, to try to burrow down yet again to what we're actually looking at here, this is an attempt to basically upgrade the word Nazi again. Nazi doesn't work, racist doesn't work, homophobe doesn't work, none of these words work, so now we're gonna claim that you were connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Come. Well, logic or reality were never binding factors in any of this to begin with, so I guess we might as well. Why not? What is possibly stopping us from simply declaring that all of our political opposition were in allegiance with Jeffrey Epstein? What is indeed stopping us? See, Gamergate, again, widely different group of people who ended up having very few things in common, which is why the entire movement, after exhausting the easy targets at the time, which were the more radical strains of feminists, the movement quickly exploded, began blowing up, and all the creators drifted their different ways as they realized that they actually had very little in common with one another. But this has remained the nightmare for the left, as it was the first moment that they realized that they had overstepped. That their push into culture was now beginning to meet real and genuine pushback, as nobody wanted their stuff in gaming, entertainment, television, TV series, movies, you named it. They had gone one step too far. This was their Operation Market Garden. And it was also, mind you, a victory, which is why they harkened back to it. But the cultural movement that started Gamergate did not dissipate. It simply continued, in fact it spread and became even more decentralized, with the various creators spiraling off to create their own careers here and there, some of them still being active today and very successful, like Sargon of Akkad or myself, for example. It also spawned a whole genre of other YouTubers critiquing cultural content online, entertainment, movies, games, etc., and specifically the political aspect of these things. It became so popular that it became a form of full-time employment because there is that much shit to go through that you can literally make it your job to uncover wokeist nonsense in entertainment. This became very profitable and of course ballooned up. This has then led to the left attempting in every way they can to discredit this movement that began the push against them, by now apparently trying to bind them to Jeffrey Epstein. Again, Gary P is not what I would call a particularly quintessential Gamergatist, as it wasn't really a Quebecoian independence movement, but easy mistake to make, I know. Anyways, the movement now has, of course, grown far more successful, and the attempts to discredit it significantly more ridiculous. But the main thrust of the article is that Gamergate was used as a tool by the evil right wing to build up their cultural influence, to normalize their arguments in the public sphere, and then launch into greater and greater power. Right. We are putting the cart before the horse here. You see, this was not something that they created themselves. It wasn't even something that they used. Trump did not use Gamergate. If anything, Gamergate used Trump more so than the reverse. But without Gamergate, Trump could not exist. However, there's the opposite. Gamergate can exist without a Trump. We are the cultural phenomenon that was created due to a genuine dissatisfaction with entertainment, with the state of the world. That is what is constantly missed in these articles. I do believe that even mentioned at some point that Gamergate was a movement created by claiming that the good people weren't actually good at all, and they simply declared themselves to be good. Naturally, of course, intrinsically good. Well, we disagree. In fact, we have produced literally a decade's worth of content that seemingly prove that you're not the good guys. And we have done so without any major international investors backing us. We don't have websites like these. We don't have government contracts. We don't have billionaires and millionaires on our side. The closest we have is Elon Musk, and all he did was buy Twitter and institute a level playing law, where everyone would get banned equally if they broke the rules. Even Jeffrey Epstein, I think he gave Gary P like $25,000, which pales in comparison to the money that's been granted to sites like Gawker or Kotaku over the years, for example. But, right, the cultural that underlined it, the genuine actual concern, of course, was very, very real. Otherwise, we would have disappeared along with Gamergate. If this was truly a one-note fabricated thing that was created solely just to chase women out of entertainment or punish them damn dare gays, even as, again, we mentioned that one of the leading figures in the early days of Gamergate was a gay man. But details. The reason why it has continued on is because we are actually in a time of cultural decline, and we're not even just talking about things like entertainment here. That was the spark, as many of us were completely unaware of politics. We didn't care, we didn't know. Politics was something for other people, and things like moral philosophy? Pfft. Boring old man shit? Of course not. But then we started noticing our games are starting to get shit. Why are all of the female characters getting ugly these days? Where did our grizzle-faced, short brown-haired space marines go? Where did all of the fun go? Oh, hold on, here's an article and a YouTube video talking about what happened to gaming. Wow, that seems pretty damn convincing. I think I'm gonna look into this some more, and there was such a strong thread of evidence there that it literally converted hundreds of thousands, indeed millions of people, and this continued on now for a decade plus, because entertainment hasn't gotten any better. In fact, the situation has only gotten worse the further we've gone along, as we realize, oh, this isn't a video game problem, this isn't a television problem, this is a real-life problem. Our economy is tanking, I wonder why. Could it have something to do with enforced diversity? What are these immigration rates? Oh. See, none of this is propaganda. It simply just isn't. What was propaganda was very clearly and very quickly ousted from the movement, which is why there is no Milo Yiannopoulos anymore, which is why Jean-Francois Garipy is virtually unknown, which is why Steve Bannon now has been thrown out of all halls of power, etc. Meanwhile, I will point out, myself and Carl here, we're still going strong. So why are we supposed to be dragged into this? As again, none of this has any actual argument against the Gamergate movement or the wider right in general. It is simply an attempt to tie us together to the far right, to Jeffrey Epstein. It is It is my alt-right video in article format. Every single thing you saw in that video is found right here, giving zero charitability to your opponent. Absolutely, check. Pissing in the well, full force. Oh god, yes. I mean, the very opening segment kind of underlines that one pretty damn well. Ignoring all of the opposition's argument and simply presenting your own worldview, quadruple and triple check. Presenting yourself as the clear, intrinsically good people with a superior moral compass, of course. Arguing that the opposition are merely just evil grifters in it for the money, obviously. See, I've been thinking about this, how we've arrived at this point where the indoctrination is actually so complete that we have separated into two fully separate and apparently self-contained worldviews. As again, this entire article is a fantastic example of just how doctrinally captured somebody can be, to the point where they are starting to see all of the connections all over the place. Suddenly, Gamergate isn't a grassroots movement that grew from genuine cultural distrust and dissatisfaction, more correctly. Instead, it is a wide-ranging conspiracy, including places like 4chan, which incidentally banned discussions of Gamergate, I'm pretty sure, around the time, but details, including Jeffery Epstein and shadowy billionaires and millionaires that are the only reason why all of these popular right-wing figures have emerged over the years. It even uses the term alt-right unironically, another movement that I will point out was literally defeated by the Gamergate crowd, what, half a decade ago, if not more? They were never a part of our grouping, and the only reason why they are continuously brought up and connected to it is because of the left-wing view, as again I went over in the alt-right playbook, that if there is any percentage whatsoever of a group of the far-right, the alt-right, that identify with any other sliver of society, like a gamer for example, that means that the entire segment is poisoned now, and all of them are alt-right adjacent. Insane? Sure, but again, we don't live in rational times now, do we? And I do love the final bit here. This rhetoric and ideology serves as tool for radicalization, whether intentional or not. They make you closed in, narrow-minded, afraid, conspiratorial. Narrow-minded, conspiratorial, and afraid. The beauty of all of this is that the article demonstrates having gotten stuck into the exact sort of mindset that it accuses Gamergate of having created. This is the full-scale left-wing indoctrination, as we have now seen again with the alt-right video. I know I am harping on about that one a lot, but it is actually a rather important video that I do think fully illuminates a lot of the problem with the modern-day left-wing. They have a worldview. This is now doctrine. It is so fully enmeshed into their very lives and how they view everything around them that to look away from it is sin. It is unthinkable. You cannot break with the orthodoxy, especially as well you have layered upon layers so many different degrees of self-incrimination and criminalization that you cannot turn away from the cult, lest you begin to realize, hold on, am I a very bad person? If, for example, Andreas Björnbeck here was to one day look around and think, okay, what if I entertained the opposition's worldview? Well, that would mean that I called someone a Nazi and a racist and a homophobe and an ist, and kind of subtly alleged that he might have some connection to Jeffrey Epstein based on solely where we sit on the political compass. Wow, that does make me a horrible human being. Yes, and as usual, the human mind doesn't like that. It likes to protect itself from a point of simple natural preservation, which is why the left-wing indoctrination is so effective, as attempting to break with it will cause you quite explicit psychological pain and discomfort, as you'll begin to have to wrestle with the fact that you might have done some pretty terrible things in the bidding of this particular orthodoxy. And as the thing goes on, you'll have to try and explain more and more and more things until you go full crazy conspiracy brain, a la the full length of this, again, rather gish-galloping article, drawing connections that are, shall we say, mildly tenuous at best, and then throwing in a couple of names of people that you presumably dislike, even if they have no connection to any of this. As the best part is, neither myself nor Sargon is ever mentioned again in this entire thing. Not once. Like, we have actually, unironically, nothing to do with any of this. Our only connection is that we were both parts of Gamergate, and I, to a significantly lesser degree as well, but as we have a sort of proximity to it, and as we are advocates for an opposing point of view, we too must be tarred with the widest imaginable brush. Listen. If I may just give one final piece of advice here to Mr. Björnbeck, consider the following. You are criticizing the far right for its bigoted worldview, that it does not allow other points of view, other thoughts, other ideas, other morals, etc., into its supposed monolithic structure, ignoring the fact that Gamergate again was a rather diverse movement, but screw that for a second. Is it not possible that by again demonstrating the willingness to take up the largest brush you can find and painting that across, literally in this case, hundreds if not thousands of different creators, most of whom vehemently disagree with one another, see mentioning me and Sargon and Garapi in the same article, just for example, that mayhaps you have developed a degree of this bigotry yourself? In attempting to slay this dragon, is it not possible that you might have become the thing you yourself claim to be fighting against? I'm sure you'd reject the idea out of hand, of course, because, again, delving deeper into that is going to require some rather uncomfortable introspection. But nevertheless, I would suggest you give it a go, because this isn't going to turn around anytime soon. In fact, it's probably never going to turn around in your favor, as I believe this entire article, let me see here, oh there we go, has 18 comments. For better or worse, Björnbeck, your side is not losing anymore, it has actually lost. And you've got to start asking yourself, why? Before you fully radicalize. As, with the current rate of attempted assassinations of right-wing individuals, I would prefer it if I, whom you've apparently taken notice to, doesn't become the next martyr on the altar of left-wing pacifism. Yes, that would be nice. We can but hope, that the various radicals out there all finally realize that this is a losing battle. It isn't worth fighting for in this way at the very least, and that we can perhaps yet again return to, dare I even say it, dialogue? A crazy thought, I know, but it's 2026. All manners of crazy shit can and do happen, like, again, seeing myself mentioned in the same breath as Jeffery Epstein. Until next time, I have been Arch, and there is no evidence I have any connection with Jeffery Epstein. Until next time, have a good day.